All right. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. And I just want to first off say that if you're watching the replay after the fact and you want to leave a comment or ask a question, just put replay into your comment. That'll help me know that it came in after the fact. But I'm so happy to be here this morning. My name is David Crabill. I am the founder of Forrager and the Forrager podcast. I help cottage food business owners get their business started off the ground, help them grow their businesses, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. So I'm very excited to be answering people's questions this morning and talking a little bit about what we can do to market and grow or start your cottage food business. If you have, if you're seeing me, please leave a comment so that I can see that. I'm going to open up a new tab here to make sure that I am indeed live. I'm almost sure I am, but start seeing the comments rolling in. Okay. All right, and I see myself live here, and I'll be looking for your comments and questions. But a lot of people ask me, I should start off by saying somebody asked in the discussion a little bit of an update on Missouri, and I think I directed them to the right place where they might have seen my update this week in a newsletter that I wrote. But basically Missouri is a very unique state. They have a couple different laws that kind of work in tandem together. And so if you're selling cookies, custom decorated cookies, likely you'll be using the law that got updated this year. It actually got updated last week, and they basically are allowing you to sell as much as you want. You don't have to adhere to a $50,000 sales limit, and you can also now ship your cookies within Missouri. So both great improvements for people selling out of their home. Also, there's the ability to sell at events with a different law, like a farmer's market if you sell your cookies there, but that did not get updated this year, and it doesn't really need to be updated. It is a pretty good law. So that was a very specific question for Missouri, but a lot of people ask me how I got started with Forrager, and as I mentioned, I've been doing this for over a decade now, and it really started from I actually wanted to sell my chocolate chip cookies, and I was thinking of selling them online, and I looked for a marketplace online to sell my homemade food. I thought there must be a marketplace to sell your homemade items, and I couldn't find any. The closest I found is Foodsy, and that's taking you way back to 2008 when they closed down, and they shifted and transitioned. So I initially started with my best friend, my business partner, my roommate, my college friend, and we were just trying to develop a marketplace to allow people to sell their homemade food, and that's why we called it Forrager. You'd be able to find your food items in your local neighborhood. That did not pan out. That marketplace didn't pan out, but in the process of starting that marketplace, I learned about the cottage food laws. I had no idea about the laws before I started the business, and I just created a simple website to kind of document the laws for the sake of the people who are using our marketplace. When the marketplace didn't pan out, I shifted my full focus to the information website. And so I've been documenting cottage food laws ever since and trying to update the map. And I now have a newsletter and email list that I send out every week. And I also have a podcast that I bring on people. And I have had a number of people from this group who have been on the podcast. Many, many more in this group are on my email list and are generous enough to stick around for every week for my newsletter. So I see a few comments already in here. Let's see. All right. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Brianna. And Andrea has a question here. And she says, when a cottage food law says you can only sell from home or farmers markets, but doesn't specify being a vendor, fall festivals, etc., how would you determine if that would be a good thing to continue doing? So Andrea, I'm trying to make sure I understand your question here. I think it says you can sell from home or farmers markets, but it doesn't say you can sell at events. And so you're trying to determine, I think, if you can sell at something like a fall festival or different event that's not a farmer's market. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what state you're in. There aren't too many states anymore that only allow you to sell from home and farmers markets. There are just maybe two, I think. Uh, but in this case, the law would definitely say that you have to sell at a farmer's market, um, which is regulated by the Ag Department, or from home, and that's it. Um, that being said, considering that you live in one of these states, um, yeah, is that you're saying it doesn't specify anything about events. Considering that you live in one of the few states that has this restriction, my guess is that it's more of a rural state that just hasn't updated their law. And so typically in this case, okay, so you live in Virginia. Um, so Virginia is a really unique state. And you might not be in a very rural place depending on where you're living. But basically, oftentimes it's okay to sell at a fall festival or something. It just kind of depends on the market manager whether they're going to be a stickler to make sure that you're following the law. Typically, they don't even know the law, and oftentimes even your ag department isn't going to be fully aware of the law either. So I know that sounds crazy, but it's extremely common. If I were you, I would sell at a fall festival, a one-time thing. We're not talking about something that you're going to be at every single week. Is that technically in line with the law? No. Is anybody going to care? Probably not. I highly doubt it. That's not even, I've never heard of somebody even reporting someone for doing that. And in this case, I'd say if you can sell at farmer's market, there's not really good reason why you can't sell an event. Oftentimes the law just wasn't written in that way from the beginning, and they haven't amended it or updated it. So I would personally do it, but technically it's not legal. Now, you don't have to be too worried about having a problem getting penalized. At the most, if someone were to, like an ag inspector, be walking around that event, extremely unlikely, and they decided that you weren't operating in line with the law, they probably would actually think you weren't operating in line with the law. But if they decide you weren't, they just tell you to stop. And there very almost certainly wouldn't be a penalty or fine associated with that. So I would personally go ahead and do it in that very specific scenario. Again, this is applicable to a very, very small handful of states these days. And Virginia is a unique one. They actually have a law that allows you to run a pretty full-fledged food business from your home. The question, I think it's like a home food processing license, something like that. The problem there is I'm not really sure how much it's actually used. I'm not sure how much ag departments recognize that bigger law, and it's an older law. So I haven't really heard of people using it successfully, but technically speaking, you'd be able to sell anywhere, and you'd be able to sell most things from your home under that other law. But it's unlikely that your ag department will allow you to use that law, and it is more complicated to get that set up. Okay, so I got another question here. And so do you use a website to create your ingredient labels, or do you do them yourself? I personally do them myself. I personally use Avery's online label builder. I think the main thing with labels to recognize is that when you're selling in person and you're selling at events, and you're selling from home and direct orders, pickup orders, delivery orders, really people are buying from you. They're not buying based off of a label. And so the label isn't really that important. I look at the podcast guests I've had, their labels are often really not good at all. The time when you really need to think about labels is when you put yourself in stores and you start to sell indirectly, because then your product needs to stand out on a shelf, and it really has to have a brand, and it really has to be something that people look at, they understand what the product is, and it looks professional. So that's when I'd recommend actually hiring somebody to design a label. That being said, there's been a lot of podcast guests I've had that have put themselves in stores and haven't had that kind of professional label, and they do quite well. It kind of just depends. But I personally, when I start out, I recommend not going through the process of trying to pay someone online to print labels. Typically, you have to have an order minimum of 100, 500, something like that, and then that leads to inflexibility. And as you're getting started with a business, you're going to be changing things all the time and adapting. So I definitely recommend printing them yourself. The next step after that would definitely be to get a label printer, like a thermal label printer, and I know people have had great success with those. I wouldn't necessarily recommend making that jump until you're really processing a lot of orders, but certainly a lot of cookiers swear by a thermal label printer. All right, so Miranda says, I'm in Massachusetts. It says no wholesale. Our class is okay if the customer pays the venue and then the venue pays me. All right, so, okay, the customer pays the venue. All right, so yeah, wholesale would mean that, you're not interacting with the customer yourself. In this case, typically people will ask questions like, how can I get around the limitation? Like, my cottage food law doesn't allow this, but, what if I just said it was a gift and, people made a donation? Things like that, we're trying to work around the law. Really, those don't really apply. They're not really legitimate ways to work around limitations of the law. In this case, you're not actually selling the cookies. You're really selling a class. And I don't know why you'd have to have the customers pay the venue, unless that's what the venue is requiring. I would say, as long as the customer is making the product themselves and you're just teaching them how to do it, I don't see any problem running a class under Massachusetts law. So I don't think you have to be worried about that. I think that you're just getting caught up on the, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you are asking whether if the venue is requiring the customer to pay them, is that okay? I would say yes, that's okay. Health department, ag department's not really going to be worried about that. They're worried about making sure that people who are buying your products are like not buying them blind, right? The whole concept there is that the customer knows who you are. That's the purpose of the direct sale. So obviously, if you're running a class, the customer knows who you are, and I don't think you have to be too worried about that. So I would, run the classes, have the customer pay the venue, have the customer pay you. Should be fine. All right, so Andrea follows up. Cottage food law businesses, farmers markets don't allow cottage food businesses. They have a waiting list to even be able to sell. Very common. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the farmers market. Some farmers markets are farmers only. Some farmers markets just don't allow home food businesses. It is their full right to be able to restrict you in that way. There's nothing you can do about it. And now you said they require you to have a business license. Even if you have a cottage food business, you definitely can have a business license and probably have to have a business license on top of that. But what there might be requiring is that you have a health permit from the ag department or something. All right, so yes, that's common, and I'm trying to see why I'm not seeing all of the comments here. They're kind of falling out of my feed. Maybe I need to open up this post fully. Click to expand. Okay, there we go. How do I do most recent here? No, live chat. I want to get everything. Sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, I think I got it here. Yes, so I got Miranda and then Andrea. Yeah, so Andrea, you can't get into a farmer's market. I would definitely recommend using any one-off pop-up events or anything like that. Okay, Amanda says, follows up, I invested in a thermal printer for my ingredient labels since I use so many of them. It's so quick and easy. Yep. And all right, Mary, will you repeat how to follow your email and other knowledge tools? I just hopped on when you were saying the information. I didn't really mention how to follow me or how to get onto my email list. Um, Basically, the only way is to sign up for my mini course. It's a week long. It's like a 10-day mini course. But basically, go to forrager.com/mini-course. I'm sure someone will throw it in the comments here. Actually, I'll probably just throw it in the comments. Forrager.com/mini-course. And yeah, so that's totally free, and it will guide you through a lot of what I've learned about starting a food business, and it gives you a pretty good marketing tool for trying to get your business off the ground without really spending any money. But anyway, at the end of that mini course, you'll be on my email list. You get a weekly email from me, and so you can I share the podcast I've been in. I share what's going on in the cottage food industry. I definitely share law updates, bill updates, and also share tips sometimes. And it's just updates to my business. It just kind of depends. Definitely my podcast, the Forrager podcast, is another amazing resource, and the guests I've had are just phenomenal. As I said, few of the guests I've had on have been come from the group, and then also Heather and Corey were on episode 50 just for the very beginning. I had a number of Facebook group owners on that episode. Definitely a special episode. All right, so Cindy, I'm in California. My question is, where do I get started when applying for a cottage food license? I've seen quite a few posts, LLC, business license, cottage license, etc. I'm wondering where I should start. Currently a hobby baker, would like to start selling. So, my advice here kind of differs from a lot of people, and I really recommend keeping things simple. You're going to definitely actually what I recommend is, if you follow my mini course, I'd recommend you start selling to make sure there's demand in your product. Now, that I wouldn't say completely applies to a decorated cookie business, because there's a lot of demand for cookies right now. It's definitely an uptrend. And generally speaking, the success of your business is going to be based on the success of your skills, the success of you being able to be personable, engaging, interactive with customers, and networking certainly helps as well. But if your cookies are up to par, you'll probably be able to sell them. There's probably a legit business there. So what I'd recommend, if you want to start the legal process, I'd recommend taking a few orders first of all. Without being too worried about the legalities. There's not really a downside to that, but once you start the legal process, talk to your environmental health department. That'd be in your county. I'm not sure what county you're in, but some are great, some are a bit harder to work with, and they'll walk you through the process of getting that permit. Now, you almost certainly, most counties in California going to require you to get a business license on top of that. Typically won't even get the permit until you get the business license. LLC, definitely would not recommend getting an LLC when starting out the gate. Maybe once you get over $10,000, $20,000 of sales in a given year, then you could look at maybe, getting the LLC for a tiny little bit of extra protection. It's not as much as people think. So, talk to you can even probably look it up, just your cottage food, your environmental department will tell you how to get the permitting process going. Angela says, I'm in Utah when submitting your recipes along with everything else. Do you include just the ingredients or the steps? So, Angela, you are in Utah, so you happen to be in one of the best states in the country, and you're saying that you're submitting your recipes, so I assume you're going under the cottage food law realm. Utah has 3 different spokes. They have a micro restaurant law that allows you kind of run a mini restaurant from your home. They have a food freedom law that lets you sell without having any red tape from the government. And then they have a cottage food law that is mainly now applicable. It used to be the only way you could sell, but it's now mainly applicable to being able to sell in stores. So if you are having to submit your recipes to the health department, I'm assuming that you're trying to get your cookies into stores and sell directly. Now, if you're not, then you can just use the freedom law. You don't have to submit any recipe to anybody, and you can just get started. But Yeah, so the cottage food permit, I can't remember, but their application process, if you need to call them, you can call them, but it's up to them. I don't remember exactly if they only require the ingredients or if they require you to list processing steps, but usually that's spelled out in the law if you have to list processing steps as well. All right, Cindy, is it a good idea to get insurance? And again, I differ a lot from other people in this regard. I would definitely say no. And most people are going to throw up their arms at that comment. The reason is because I haven't really seen people using their insurance. And I actually used to talk to Flip. Flip is the kind of the biggest provider of food liability insurance in the country. I could not get them to confirm that any single cottage food business has called a claim ever. So generally speaking, if you're selling at an event, at a farmer's market, they'll often require you to get liability insurance. $1 million, $2 million policy that runs, a little under $300 a year if you use Forrager, I guess Forrager 10 discount code on, maybe Heather and Corey have one through Flip as well. You're not going to get much lower than that. But yeah, though the events will require it, and so you definitely need food liability insurance in that case. If you're not selling through events, I don't see a ton of benefit to having food liability insurance. You have to understand what kind of business you're running here. You're selling cookies, so you're selling things that are totally non-perishable, totally safe. They're not going to get anyone sick. Now, if you're starting to sell perishable foods with your business, I definitely recommend getting insurance in that case, but this is a different kind of business. The only time I've heard of somebody actually using their insurance wasn't a cottage food business. I heard of another type of business who set themselves up at a market, and they didn't use the concrete buckets to hold their tent down appropriately, and the wind came and it blew their tent over into somebody else's tent and wiped out their product. I don't think it injured anybody, but it destroyed a good amount of product, and there was obviously money there that they had to compensate for it, so they called an insurance claim for that. Again, talking about an extremely rare scenario here where you're going to be needing to use insurance. So in my opinion, when I started my business, I did not pay $300 to get insurance. I only paid my local State Farm agent $30 a month for the months in which I was selling in the market, because I have a very holiday-focused seasonal business. So that's my 2 cents on that. Katie says, I live in Texas and usually only do a couple orders a month, as I also work a full-time job. Do I need to establish an LLC for my small cookie business? Definitely not. You do need to technically run the business under the cottage food law. Don't think Texas has any kind of permitting process there, but your county or city technically might require you to have a business license. That's a general business license. It has nothing to do with the cottage food law whatsoever. Do technically need to pay taxes on that money, any income that you get from that. And that's really all you have to be worried about. I would not recommend really anybody starting an LLC when starting their business, regardless of how many orders they're getting. But that being said, I will say an LLC is oftentimes pretty easy to set up. In some states, it's really not that expensive. I live in California, where it costs $800 per year to run an LLC, regardless of how much you're selling. But yeah, so a lot of people just do that for peace of mind. But the thing with the LLC is that people don't actually understand that it doesn't limit your liability that much. It would especially be important if you have an employee, and especially if you don't trust that employee, they're not a family member of yours. So what's a good example? Probably a liability it's going to maybe come is when you're doing a delivery or something, and say you're doing it for business purposes. You're acting as a representative employee, and so you drive the company vehicle into something, and that causes damage. So in that case, you would think that the LLC is going to protect your assets, but because if it's determined that your negligence caused, your personal negligence caused the accident and caused the problem, they can still come after you and come after your house, come after other assets. So like in the most extreme cases, which is the whole reason why people get an LLC, typically they still technically could come after you. They could break the veil. What's the term? But yeah, so with an LLC, if an employee were to drive into someone's, whatever, and injure somebody or destroy something like a building, then they would be liable, and your LLC would protect you and your own personal assets in that case. So, it's kind of complicated. It's kind of fuzzy. There's a lot of, gray area there, but, just generally speaking, LLCs are not the be all and end all of protection when you are the only business, the only employee in your business. All right, so Rebecca says, do you have any info or tips for Canadians? I honestly don't. I mean, I have, talked to a few of them. I know that they have, pretty strict food laws. At least, like in Toronto, I have talked to only a handful of them. But yeah, they definitely have the restrictions. I think it's actually more strict to sell homemade food in Canada. I can't say I'm really familiar or aware of any law that allows homemade food sales, but that being said, it might be possible. I just haven't had enough exposure. I don't have Canadians reaching out to me, and that's probably because Google's not, sending them my way based on the way my site is set up. But yeah, I'm sorry, Rebecca, I don't have a lot of information there. Talk to your health department is obviously a first step, or whatever it would be. I don't know if ag departments are in Canada. Maya, how about New Jersey? I just started baking from home, used to work in a bakery, but don't know if I should get the license yet. So since you used to work in a bakery, you probably are, very skilled, and I would say would probably do quite well with a business. If you look at the guests that I've had on the show, a lot of them, I'd say almost half of them at least, have had food service industry experience. So you know what you're doing. If you know you want to build a business, you want to make some money from this, I would recommend going through and getting the license for sure. The only reason I wouldn't recommend getting a license if you're trying to sell, like not follow the law, and then you're trying to sell under the table. In that case, it doesn't really make sense to get the license. A lot of people do that. It's very common, and there's not a lot of repercussions for doing that. But yeah, I would say go ahead. And I think that the ready to cook business should be very doable from New Jersey if you're not shipping. So Karen, I live in Alabama and my daughter lives in Georgia. I would like to sell cookies in both states. Is that possible as long as I follow both states' cottage food laws? Yeah, so this is a complicated one. Basically, Alabama is, oh no, I was thinking of Arkansas. Alabama, yeah, so you're technically not allowed to sell in Georgia. I'm almost sure that Alabama doesn't allow out-of-state sales. So we're being technical. Now, I'm using technical terms here, or a technical perspective. They're probably not going to care, right? That's probably the be-all end of all of it. But if you're trying to do everything totally legally, then what you could do is have your daughter, I mean, technically, no, you're not going to be able to sell in Georgia, but if you were to produce stuff at your daughter's house under her, license or whatever, permit exemption, then that would be allowed, but that doesn't sound like what you're trying to do. So I would say if you're trying to be fully legal about it and not break any laws or rules, I'd say no, you can't sell in Georgia. But I can't actually remember entirely whether Alabama restricts that or not. Yeah, so Angela, in Utah, to be able to sell brewed tea, you have to be a different license. Do you have to get a different license, or does it fall under the cottage food laws, sell from home or markets or that? So brewed tea is a very unique product because most times when you're selling drinks or things that falls out of the scope of the cottage food law, and I think it does in this case too. But brewed tea is a non-perishable food. Like, it's not going to get anyone sick, and I believe that the food freedom law allows you to sell all non-perishable foods in Utah. Now, most states don't have this allowance, but in Utah, I believe you can use the food freedom law to sell your brewed tea directly to people, assuming it doesn't need to be refrigerated or anything like that. And yeah, you don't have to get a license or permission from anyone to do that. The only thing is that you can't sell it in a store. You can't put it on a shelf. Now, under the cottage food law, the one that allows you to sell indirectly, I don't believe you'd be able to sell brewed tea under that law. Okay, so Brianna says, I'm in California trying to start selling macarons. I'm a little confused what is allowed as far as those go, since most are kept refrigerated for storage, but ingredients are required to be shelf stable. Do you know what is acceptable? Brianna, I would say in general, macarons are perfectly allowed in California. They have even made improvements in the last few years to say meringue powders are allowed and stuff like that. So the problem with macaron, or the problem in general, is that California is not going to allow you to use raw egg whites in a frosting. So like a Swiss meringue buttercream is not going to be allowed. The difference with macarons is that, you're creating that meringue and then you're fully baking it. So there is no real reason for you not to be able to sell macarons, assuming that the filling that you're using is not, a meringue type based filling. So like if it's a buttercream, it should be totally fine. So I should also say things like royal icing, things like that are also restricted. But yes, most likely you'll be able to sell your macarons, no problem. All right, Alicia, I live in Florida. Other than having a local business license, are you required to have your home inspected? No, you're definitely not required to have your home inspected in Florida, and you can move forward with your business. Keyshawn, Illinois recently started cottage food law this year. I haven't applied yet, but plan on it. Any experience with Illinois? So actually, they didn't recently start their cottage food law. They recently improved their cottage food law, and they made it way better. Actually, for the longest time, Illinois was the hardest state to get started in. I'd say the problem with Illinois is dealing with their health department. That triad of states, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Don't know why. Extremely difficult to work with their ag or health departments. So fortunately, the new law allows you to sell. It used to be really good for selling at farmers markets. Now they've expanded it to allow you to sell from home as well. I don't think you need to get any kind of permit. If I just haven't had it, they just updated it, so I can't remember exactly. But I don't think you have to get a permit. Maybe you do. I can't remember. But yeah. I would say I don't have a lot of experience with Illinois' new law that allows you to sell from home. But I haven't heard a lot of people using it yet, but hopefully I'll get somebody on the podcast soon that has. Sorry, that's not a great answer to your question, Keyshawn. All right, Amanda, I live in Louisiana. Our law doesn't say that we can ship, but it doesn't say we can't. One of those gray areas. Can you advise on this? That's the case in a lot of states, actually. They don't say you can't. They don't say you can. First of all, you got to look at do they say you can sell out of state? I mean, do they say you can only sell in state? Interstate sales are prohibited. That's a first step. Typically, yeah. I mean, if your state doesn't say that you can't ship, then it's typically allowed. Now, I would look at what I say on here, because typically I will use the most generous interpretation of the law unless I see anything to the contrary. So I'm looking at Forrager right now, and I'm looking up the I just wanted to check. Yeah, Alabama does not allow interstate sales. And then Louisiana is going to, where are you, Louisiana? All right, so they're not saying you can, they're not about selling interstate, and they also don't say anything. I have them down as that you can ship from your, I think I do. Let me Sorry about that. Let me make sure. Double make sure. So I can't remember, but oftentimes I look at my own website to remember what I said. I didn't actually specify in here whether or not you can ship, but in this case, what I'd probably do in your case is ship within state lines, and then you're probably going to be okay. But yeah, it is a gray area, and so most likely you're not going to be stopped in. If you were stopped, like worst case scenario, you're gonna be taking a small claims court. That's what a general concern is. You can say, hey, there isn't anything in the law that prohibits this, so there's not really a problem. And I haven't heard of anybody going to small claims court anyway. Alicia, also, I was recently informed Florida now allows cottage food bakers to ship out of state. Is this true? It is absolutely true. Florida is one of the 2 states, along with Arkansas, that allows out-of-state sales, explicitly allows that. There are other states that likely it is allowed. The catch here is that technically speaking, if you're able to sell out of state, you're only able to sell to a state that allows the home food products from your state to be entering into their commerce. So technically speaking, you're not going to be able to sell to California, right? Because they're not going to allow you to sell. They're not going to allow homemade food from out of state under their law. So what we know for sure is that you, as a Floridian, can sell to someone in Arkansas and vice versa. You likely can sell to Pennsylvania. There's a few other states like Louisiana, as we see as a gray area. But that's the catch, is that technically speaking, even though you can ship interstate, you can only ship to states that also allow, if that makes sense. That being said, no one's regulating it. A lot of people are doing it. So, yeah, if you used Etsy to sell your items across state lines, somebody stopped you, but in the very unlikely case that somebody stopped you, you can say, well, Florida allows interstate sales, so I thought it was okay. But likelihood of you being stopped for that is extremely low. Right, Terry, if you use pasteurized egg whites and frosting, it's now allowed in California. I did mean to mention that. That's why I said raw egg whites are not allowed. So yes, they've actually done a great job allowing, pasteurized egg whites, meringue powders, and yeah. All right, Crystal, I'm in Indiana, and they just passed that we can sell it at events. Where do I go from here? Do I need some kind of license or insurance? I'm not sure where even to begin help. And yeah, I mean, Indiana used to have one of the most restrictive laws in the country. They used to only let you sell in farmers markets, period. And not only can you sell at events, you can also sell from your house. You can do deliveries, you can do pickups. So they become a very good state. I am trying to remember, it's because it's such a new law, I'm trying to remember what I wrote, but what I'd recommend is going to Forrager.com, Forrager.com, and looking up your state's law. You'll see the map there, you'll see them ranked on the map, and then, you click on Indiana, read through that whole page. If you are still confused, email me at david@forrager.com, and I'll be sure to answer any extra questions you have. And Crystal said, do you need some kind of license or insurance? You definitely don't need insurance unless the event you're selling at requires it. And license, I can't remember, but I don't think that Indiana's requiring a license. All right, Chris, in Iowa, under the cottage food law, you're not allowed to sell in stores. But what about having a vendor spot in a holiday shop? And Chris, I'm not so sure about that. Let me try to remember. So under Iowa's basic law, you're not allowed to sell in stores, but Iowa also has a home food processing establishment law that does allow you to sell in stores. So you definitely should look into that. It's more complicated to get that set up, but it's quite flexible once you do get it set up. So Iowa is one of the best states in the nation. And having a vendor spot in a holiday shop should be perfectly fine under their basic law. That would be what you wouldn't have to go through all the hoops in that case. And so, Kristen, you live in one of the best states. So basically, if you want to do it, you likely can do it as long as it's not a meat-based. Well, actually, you can sell meat-based product as long as it's not a meat-based product that was processed in a USDA processing plant. Mona, is California allowing cookiers to ship in or out of state? Has the law changed yet? Yeah, it changed last year. You can you can ship cookies within California. Uh, Heidi, I'm in Wisconsin. I know we just had an update. I'm not sure exactly what update you're referring to. There definitely, you might have seen Lisa post that Wisconsin is, trying to renew their efforts on the lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of years now, at least, that you've been able to sell your baked goods out of your home, and there was a issue there with that's just such a hard thing with the ag department. I don't know why, but they were trying to prevent people from selling items unless they didn't have flour as their main component. So like you couldn't sell a baked granola. It's a baked good, but doesn't have flour as a main ingredient. So they're trying to restrict that. They got that overturned. But yeah, you should be able to sell your cookies at events directly in Wisconsin. Laura, I'm in Illinois too. So confusing to try to get started. Part of the confusion there, Laura, is that a lot of the health departments or ag departments, they don't, I guess in the health department in Illinois that you're dealing with, they don't actually know what they're doing, or haven't taken the time to get educated on the law. And some health departments are actually trying to prevent people from starting their businesses. So it is a frustrating experience right now, but this is the growing pains of having a new law. All right, yes, Keyshawn. Well, you're not going to be my first guest from Illinois because I have had guests before, but I haven't had a guest using the new law. So that might be what you are, Keyshawn, the first guest using the new law. Okay, so Amanda, okay, so I thought, but I wanted to get your opinion. All right, thanks so much. Ginger, Illinois is very interesting. State laws with county laws are not on the same page. Yeah, and people are working on that. I know that the Institute for Justice has been trying to communicate with counties to make sure that they are using actual law and they're not trying to step over their boundary line. And it is just the unfortunate thing of living in Illinois, which for some reason happens to have extremely restrictive health officials. So yeah, don't have a ton of information there, but I'd say people are working on it and should get better over time. Maybe people selling unfilled macaron shells on Etsy since they're unfilled, is this legal from South Carolina? Exactly remembering what the restriction would be in South Carolina for selling filled macarons. You're going to see people selling almost anything on Etsy. Etsy's not really a regulated place, and there's not people, the government's not going to be trying to regulate Etsy. So you're going to see everything under the sun on Etsy, and people ask, are they being legal? Most of the time, they're not selling legally. That's the truth. But people do it. They don't get in trouble. They are quite successful selling on Etsy. So I'll leave it up to you. I don't think that South Carolina allows out-of-state sales. Let me look real quick here. Yeah, I don't have them. They don't specifically say that you can't sell out of state. So potentially, technically might be allowed. But yeah, I would say, generally speaking, if you're selling on Etsy, it's typically not legal. But unless you're using Commercial Kitchen to produce your items. That doesn't mean it's not common. Bobby, as far as I understand, where I am in Hawaii, we are not allowed to sell wholesale. Business coach I consulted with was sure there was a loophole that allows it, but never confirmed. Where to look to find out? Well, I'd look on Forrager as a starting point, and I'm pretty sure they're right. Yeah, Hawaii is not going to allow, they're going to only allow sales at roadside stands, events, and from home. So, I am not familiar with any kind of loophole that allows you to sell at stores. Hawaii, probably a more easygoing place, and so a lot of store owners might let you sell products in their stores, and that's the case in a lot of rural states in the U.S. So I, wouldn't be surprised if you're able to, but is it legal to? I doubt it. Cindy, if I apply for a Class A in California, would I be able to sell at farmers markets? Yes, you absolutely would. The Class B is only if you're trying to sell in stores and you're not going to be physically present there when you make the sale. Patty, I'm in Maryland and not sure what I should do. I'm planning to stay in the hobby baker level for a while. What can you recommend for me? Can I restate how I can find your podcast? Well, you can definitely look up the podcast by just going to any podcast player, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Type in Forrager, Forrager. Also type in my name, should work, and you will find it. You can also go to forrager.com/podcast, and you'll be able to see all the episodes there and listen to them on my website directly. So, yes, you're not sure what you do, planning to stay at the hobby baker level for a while. So, I'm not sure exactly what your goals there are, Patty. What I recommend is take my mini course. Go to forrager.com/mini-course. Take my mini course, and when you get the first email, I'll ask you to reach out to me. Send me any questions that you have, and I will be, sending a pretty thorough response to that. And, I'm not sure exactly how to answer this question because it depends on your specific circumstance, but we can talk about it through email. So, and David at Forrager.com, you can always reach me directly there. Alicia, thanks so much. Been holding off on Etsy and other personal inquiries. Now I can move forward. Great. Amanda, how does the sales cap come into play with the cottage food law? If you go over the cap, what kind of penalty consequences would be expected? Is there anyone even monitoring regulating this in Louisiana? So yeah, the answer is there's really no consequence whatsoever for going over the limit. I've heard of the limit talked about like an umbrella. I think Kelly Masters is the one I heard talk about this in Texas. So like the cottage food law is set up so that, as long as you're following the law, then nobody can come after you and take down your business. So as long as you're selling under the limit, as long as you're following the rules, you're pretty much protected from anything really bad happening. That being said, bad things don't really happen. The only person coming after business probably to be a competitor who wants to, report you. So that'd be the main concern, is if you're not actually following the law, if you're selling more than you're supposed to. But then again, I think Louisiana has like a $30,000 limit, so a pretty low limit. And if you're selling over the limit, nobody's really going to notice. So yeah, there's nobody regulating it. I think at that point, it just comes down to, do you want to follow the law or not? And a lot of people would say, I want to follow the law. I want to be legal. And maybe don't understand why the limitation was put in place. But you have to understand the concept of a sales limit. The purpose is because the health department really wants you to be using a commercial kitchen to produce food. And this cottage food law is intended to be a stepping stone to that point. So they're saying once you get to $30,000 of sales, I think that's the right amount. At that point, we'd like you to move up. We'd like you to move to commercial kitchen. The other thing is, I see people getting really worried about sales limits and thinking, oh, I only have $20,000 sales limit in my state. I'm not sure if it's worth it. The reality is, anyone can tell you this, if they've been actually producing $30,000 worth of decorated cookies out of their kitchen is like, there's cookies everywhere. And at that point, you're already going to be thinking about moving out of a commercial kitchen anyway. So these states with like a higher sales limit, like 50,000, 100,000, like you're not even going to get there. The only people I've seen get there are like in high income cost of living states where things just cost more. And then also, typically not talking about decorated cookies. But it's possible in those states, higher cost of living states, to hit that limit. But don't worry about the sales limit too much. It's the whole point. All right, Terry. Happens in California too. County health departments don't apply state rules equally. Yeah, I know Cottage Baker in South California. They use fresh fruit and whipped topping all the time. Very visible about their offerings. Frustrating, but I just try to do my own thing. Just follow the rules. Yeah. In some counties, they're just going to only allow what the state CDPH, California Department of Public Health, allows, and that's it. They won't allow anything else, and others are, a lot more lackadaisical about it. Andrea, what's the best way to grow my cottage food cookie business in a new city state when I'm prohibited from selling online in Virginia? So I'm trying to visualize what you're actually trying to do here, but Andrea, I'd recommend you go through my mini course. The back end of that mini course is going to talk about how to do a launch process with your business. I think doing a giveaway launch or doing some kind of a launch process is the best way to get yourself into a new area. This wouldn't just be if you're, trying to sell in an area other than your own, but if you're trying to start up your business and sell brand new in your own location. That's the answer I'm going to go with there. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Certainly people network. I do a lot of networking. So with cookie businesses in particular, talking with bridal suites, talking with, wedding planners, things like that. The more you can network, and that's another way to get into the area, doing bridal shoots. But yeah, it's not super specific answer there, but we can talk more about it on email if you want. Okay, Deb, I have one, just not sure how to put the ingredients in order as well as sub-ingredients, just using it for shipping. So yeah, with the ingredients, the way to order them is just when I make the recipe of my whatever I'm making, I use a digital scale. Hopefully you have a digital kitchen scale. If you don't have a digital kitchen scale, you absolutely need to have one. That's like a requirement for running a business as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, you end up taking a little bit extra trying to weigh out every ingredient that you put into the product, and then based on the weight you order the ingredients. Main thing with the ingredient list is make sure to add every single ingredient, every single sub-ingredient. So if you're using M&Ms, you just look on the package of M&Ms and explicitly copy every single word off of that M&M label. So yeah, that's the main thing. Your labels can get very, very long with decorated cookie businesses. All right, Rachel says, in Kentucky, we're not allowed to sell anything with uncooked butter. That's what I was told by Lewis Ramsey, which is overseas over home-based processors in Kentucky. We can't use actual butter in our buttercream. Seems so silly. I'm not sure if this is a common thing in most states or not, but it's very frustrating. Do you know why? I'd love to try to get it changed somehow. Rachel, that doesn't sound right to me. I have never heard of that before, and Kentucky used to not allow you to sell things that had, let me make sure they do. I'm checking real quick. That sounds really weird. I've never heard of someone differentiating between cooked butter or uncooked butter. And so I don't have it explicitly said in here that you can use buttercream, but I also don't have it explicitly said in here that you can't. I actually thought that you could. I can't remember exactly, but I do question whether what that person said is true. I'm not sure who Lewis Ramsey apartment or something. That's very strange to me. So if you learn more about this or have more questions, email me at david@forrager.com. We can talk more about this, but that sounds very strange. I doubt that that's true. All right, and then Andrea says, thank you. All right, let's see. So that is the end of I think I got everybody's questions there in the comment stream. We're actually encroaching on an hour here. Let's see, is there any other questions? Should we want changes? Oh yeah, somebody asked in a comment on the event post, it said, I hoped that the micro restaurant laws would have been passed in my state. and like every micro restaurant law in this year did not pass. So we now have only two states that allow micro restaurants, California and Utah, and it's very restrictive in Utah and California. You can't use it unless you live in a certain county. So so the micro restaurant law is not really going to be applicable to most decorated cookie businesses. I assume this is somebody who's trying to like start up a cafe out of their house and wants to sell other things, and then have like their cookies be on top of that, like to run a bakery selling sandwiches or whatever. What I'd say with the micro restaurant laws is we really don't, I think we've learned this year that we can't really wait for those. There's a lot of resistance to them, and I don't know when or if those laws are going to be passed anytime soon. So if you want to start a restaurant, you certainly, I would recommend using the cottage food law as a stepping stone to build up an audience, build up a following. And then, once you have, substantial decorated cookie business there, make the leap into the commercial kitchen space to start that bakery, whatever you would want to use micro restaurant law for. All right. Yes, let's see. All right, there got a few new comments in here. So thank you, Mona. Thanks, Alicia. So Amanda, your days. Two of my major questions were answered easily, quickly, right here today. Thank you much. You're welcome. Terry, do you know of any changes being talked about in the California law? No. As many of you know, I'm the one who spearheaded the last bill initiative that went into effect at the beginning of this year. Very, very, very hard to get that to go through. There's just so... I've tracked bills for the longest time. I'd never actually started one or like walked it through the process myself. There's just so many people that get involved in that process on the government level, in the private sector level, and we literally just barely got that passed by the skin of our teeth. And I definitely at that point was like, I'm not going to be spearheading a bill for a little while. We're trying to get in-state shipping to go, and we got it. We got the increase in the sales limit. That was great. We also improved the law a little bit for people selling indirectly in other counties. Basically, like, it was a perfect time to start that law because, the pandemic sort of forced people to look closely at the restrictions for, selling online and shipping products instead of having them come get up at your door. So even in the best of times, it was very difficult to get that through. There are a number of things I'd like to improve with the cottage food law, but I'd say it's going to be at least another couple of years before I try to spearhead anything. And, the law hadn't been updated since 2013. So I don't know anybody else who is trying to spearhead it. But that being said, with that new bill coming into play, there's, kind of people have gotten, the wheels have gotten in motion, right? So if somebody else wanted to try to start a bill, maybe using Assemblyman Robert Revis's office, I don't know if he'd be willing to pick up another bill. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of legwork's already been done. So if somebody else wanted to do that, that'd be fine, but I don't know of anybody who's stepped up to the plate and tried to do that. I should say, Terry, there are new cottage food rules, but they're not for the cottage food law. There's currently one going through. They're trying to basically try to take the concept there was try to take street vendors and incorporate them into the micro restaurant law. So we're seeing more movement on the micro restaurant law space, and that law, I just briefly looked at it recently. It looks like it's been totally changed and sapped, and I think it's not even part of the micro restaurant law anymore. So I wouldn't wait, Terry, for any kind of adjustment or improvement. And thanks, Bobby. So I think that's it. And again, if you want to check out my website, it's forrager.com, Forrager. And the first place I'd start is my mini course, forrager.com/ mini-course. You sign up for that, and I don't know why I'm giving it away for free. It's quite a comprehensive mini course for free. They'll walk you through how to use my website, to what you should know when starting a business, to how to market. Even if you already have a business, the marketing side of it at the end of it, it's maybe not something you're aware of unless you've been following me for quite some time. So I definitely recommend you do that. All right, so Kim, we have another question here. I think in Tennessee, I was told that they should be being restrictive again. I wanted to be a vendor selling my sugar cookies at farmers markets. They require you to put your home address on your products. I can't find the changes. So Kim would become more restrictive. In fact, yes, Tennessee did change their law. They definitely made it a lot less restrictive and a lot more like a food freedom law. Now, that being said, there might have been some aspect of the previous law that was changed that people don't like having, maybe previously you didn't have to put your home address on labels and now you do. So that might be what the concern is, but let me look real quick here. Tennessee, they just improved their law, this year? Yes. And I can't even remember sometimes. There's so many that I have to keep track of, but it was in July that they enacted when that law went into effect. And okay, so prior to 2017, there's 2 laws, and then they had. So that's the thing. They had this domestic kitchen law that I'm not really sure how much ag departments recognized it or used it, but yes, that's reminding me. I think what they're saying is there was a domestic kitchen law that allowed you to sell indirectly, and it required an extensive application process. Like this is similar to if you were trying to get a commercial food permit. And so they did away with the domestic kitchen law, and you can still sell indirectly, but you maybe can't sell as many things. Like the new law, the new food freedom law says you can sell anything. You can sell your products anywhere, and you can sell any kind of non-perishable food. So decorated sugar cookies would fall into that category easily. But I can't remember if the domestic kitchen law allowed you to sell perishable foods, in which case, yes, they did away with the domestic kitchen law, and in that way, the laws in Tennessee would become more restrictive. But for a cookier, in general, we would say they have only gotten better. All right. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Deb. Yes, Rachel, the Tennessee law has changed again this year. Yep, Kim, all right. All right, so I think, let me just make sure I've got everything covered. We're past the 10 o'clock mark. We're past the hour mark. Certainly, I'm happy to answer anyone else's question. You can leave a reply onto this thread, and I will respond to it. Just try to maybe include the word replay in your comments so I can know. Also, david@forrager.com. You can freely reach out to me there, and I'm not always the fastest at responding to my email. I do batch it, and sometimes I get way behind, but I promise you I will respond to it eventually. So, and with that, I think that's all the comments. Thanks for keeping me busy for the last hour. You had great questions, and I had a blast.